Hello everyone and welcome back. So let us continue with our course, and in this course we'll be learning about the paging tree library. So this is the first lecture, and what we will do in this lecture is we'll try to understand a basic concept or the basic overview of the paging tree library before we move on to our practical knowledge. So let us try to understand in a brief about the paging tree library. So the paging tree library will help you to load and display the data from your large data set from your local storage as well as from over the network storage. So let's say you have hundreds of millions of record in your local DB or from your remote API. So if you want to load this kind of data, it's obviously bandwidth consumption is over there, and as well as your system resources will be used a lot. But with the help of the paging tree library, we can reduce all of those stuff. So we can just request for a specific page to display for our users. So if you are familiar with the backend development, and we have, like, let's say a pagination of the data in the backend, we can request like a page 1 with 10 record of data and page 2 with another 10 record of data. So we just want to load a few record for our user that is really resource efficient, as well as the bandwidth consumption is really low over there. So this is a similar concept over here with the paging tree library. So we just want to request a specific page of pages, or the specific page for our user, and let's say we want to request a page 1, page 2, page 3. So we can do with the paging tree library. And the component of the paging tree library are also a recommended way of your Android app architecture, so it can fit with your MVVM architecture, right? So that's really great about the paging tree library. And also it can integrate cleanly with the other Jetpack component, and also provide you with the first-class support with the Kotlin. And if you are already familiar with the Kotlin programming language, that's really great over here. And let's try to understand some of the benefit using the paging tree library. So the number one you can see is the in-memory cache for your page data. So this ensures you that your app use a system resource more efficiently while working with the page data. So it can have an in-memory cache, as well as we have a built-in request duplication that ensures that your app use the network bandwidth and the system resource more efficient. Which means that if you have already requested like a page 1, and on the next time you don't have to request again page time, and so you don't have to continuously request the same duplicate request that you have previously sent. So if you have already sent for the page 1, so it can automatically detect that you have already sent a request for that one. And configurable recycle view adapters that automatically request data as the user scrolls down to the end of the loaded data. So we have a configurable which is more flexible way of showing your list to the user, and it has a recycle view adapter that we will see later then how to implement it with our recycle view. And when we have a list of data, when the user scrolls to the bottom of the list, it will automatically request the next page for us. And the first class support for the Kotlin coroutines and the flow, as well as we have the live data and the RxJava. For this course, we'll be focusing on the flow as well as the RxJava part. And also we have a built-in support for the error handling, including the refresh and the retrieve capabilities, which means that whenever there is certain error, we can directly get it from the paging tree library and populate it to the user. We can also show the progress bar based on the refresh, right? And also we can add the retrieve capability. So let's say we can just click on the button, and if there is an error, just retrieve that particular error. And now let's go down and we will see the setup that we have to add the dependencies. Currently it is in the beta version, and currently the 3.0.beta 02. and we will be using the RxJava 3 version, and we will not focus on the RxJava 2 part. And the architecture, the library architecture, you can see the paging library integrates directly with the recommended Android app architecture, which we will be using a MVVM architecture over here. And the library components operates on the 3 layer of your app. So the first layer is the repository layer, and the second is the view model layer, and the third one is the UI layer. So on the repository, you can see we have a paging source as well as the remote mediator over here. The paging source, if you take a look over here, the paging source object defines a source of data from how and how to retrieve the data from the source. And also the paging source object can load data from any single source, including the network or the local database. So the paging source is the one that we define, and how do we get and what kind of data that we are going to get from. Is it from the local DB or is it from the remote API? And the next one, we have a remote mediator which can handle, which can request data from the layered data source. Let's say you have a request from the network and you insert that request to the local DB, and then from the local DB you are populating it to the user, so the UI side. So there is a big difference between the paging source and the remote mediator. Remote mediator can handle a layered data source, which means it can request from the API and insert that request to your local DB, and from that local cache DB you can populate it to your UI side. But the paging source, we can just have a single layer of the data source, which means we can either request from your local DB or from your API side. And on the view model, we have the pager that we use a flow or the flowable of the paging data, where we handle the logic. And on the UI, we are using the paging data adapter, which we will replace with the recycle view adapter, where we will be displaying all to our user. So this is the 3 key part that we have to take a note: the repository layer, where we'll be using the paging data source, and the remote mediator. And just now I have already mentioned that what is the difference between the paging source and the remote mediator. And the paging, the view model, which is a pager, and we get the paging data over there in the form of the flow or the flowable based on the Kotlin flow or the RxJava. And then we have a paging data adapter that we will be using in our UI to replace our recycle view adapter. So you can just go through all of those stuff on the repository layer and the view model layer and also the UI layer. So the primary library component of UI layer is the paging data adapter for a recycle view adapter that handles the paginated data. So we will replace a recycle view adapter with the paging data adapter. And also you can just go to the view model layer that we have that components the view model layer of the UI is the paging data that will be getting a paging data, and this paging data is a container for the snapshot of the paginated data. So it contains a paginated data, right, so that will be passing to the UI layer. And on we have a pager components for the public API constructing the instance of the paging data that are exposed to the reactive stream based on the paging source object and the paging config that we have the configuration. So all of this stuff you can just go and read through, try to understand it better, and in our next lecture or whenever we are actually doing the practical, we will have a more knowledge about it, and how to implement it and what are the configurations that we have to do. So just go through this documentation. It's recommended because you will understand it more better. And that's all for this lesson, and we will move on to our next lecture where we will configure our project. So that will be on the practical side. So let's meet up in the next lecture. Till then, have a great day.